cut out the clutter. I'm sure as a student, you must have come across so many different tips and tricks on YouTube. And doesn't it really get overwhelming? There's so many tricks out there that people keep on bombarding you with your mom saying that you should be studying for 5 to 6 hours every single day. Their older brother saying that you should use the Pomodoro technique. So many different ways to go about the same thing on a platform like this can get very daunting. So what do we do about it? What's the way out? Today, let's do this task. You and me, let's go over YouTube. Let's look at some study tips that may or may not be useful for us, and let's create an actually good study schedule or a study plan to excel as an Indian student. Let's get going.
Step 1. Start by studying answers first. This is a study tip that my mom figured out. I've never heard it before on the internet. If you're someone that gets overwhelmed easily, especially if there's a lot of content that you need to study and you just don't know where to start, compile all the questions at the end of each topic and write all the answers down.
This is a tip my mom also gave me when I was a really young child. And you know, this genuinely works when it comes to even college. When you have a plethora of chapters to go about, when you have so many different topics to cover, the simplest trick you can do is to frame your understanding of these concepts in a question and answer format. Say, right now you may be studying, say, physics, chemistry, mathematics, bio, and there are so many different concepts. Let's take an example. Let's talk about chemical bonding. Now, when you're studying chemical bonding, there's so many different rules that you're going to go about, so many different theories. Why don't you just make as many questions as possible? This is a modification I'm making to her tip. Go through your content, make as many questions as possible, and write down those answers. Write it down in a question answer format and make your notes enriched that way.
Master is to spend more time learning the basics. I know. Everyone says that, but how do you do it and why? Understand basics by reading through the subtopics, learning objectives, and illustrations of the previous topic first.
Let me summarize it in an even simpler way. Get answers to your 2 questions, why and how. Trust me, that gives you the best way to go over your basics. When you ask these questions, why and how, you are forced to look out for answers that are much more in depth, but trust me, they'll go into the most basic ideas. As I was taking the example of chemical bonding, if I were to ask you why coordination bonds are a special case of covalent bonds, the answer lies in the basics of how chemical bonds are formed itself. Coordinate bonds are also formed due to sharing of electrons. Covalent bonds are also sharing of electrons. What makes them different? Within a covalent bond, you have electrons being shared by both atoms that are forming this bond, whereas in a coordinate bond, you have electrons being shared within the molecular orbital that you're forming. Remember, molecular orbital theory. Within the molecular orbital that you're forming, the electrons that are sharing, the electrons that are being shared, are being contributed by one particular atom. That is the only difference. You're having an orbital being formed, you're having electrons being shared. That is what even molecular orbital theory talks about, isn't it? So see, I explained the basic idea of a molecular orbital theory as well by going to the nature of bonding. When you have electrons being transferred, electrons being shared, you are having a bond being formed. This is the basic understanding we require. If I say ask you to prove how a Carnot engine works, I don't expect you to go about explaining all the equations to me. Even if you're able to explain that energy moves from a state of high energy to low energy, what law is this? This is the second law of thermodynamics. Understand those basics by asking questions like why and how.
For every subject, have a Google Docs page dedicated to questions you don't understand. Make sure you write down your current understanding of that question Then show this document to your lecturer or teacher and ask them to explain the right answer for you.
This perfectly lies in with the kind of question that I asked you to make at the start itself. So now that you have made questions when you're going through your particular chapter, when you're writing those answers and you come across a point where you're unsure of what the answer is or you require a better explanation, go ahead, ask your teachers those questions. Take those questions with you, take those answers with you, get those explanations, get that understanding sorted. This even brings me to a strong connection to my second point that I made, to get your basics clear. When you are having difficulties in creating those understandings of your particular questions and the answers that you need for that, you may even realize that there are certain basic pointers that you're missing out. This is where you need to ask your teachers for help. This is where you need to get to know your teachers better. Your teachers are also firstly human beings. Secondly, they all have different personalities and different outlooks towards what they want to achieve and what they want to see you achieve. So, identifying the right person to get your understanding from is important. Also, understanding how your teachers can help you the best is also important. So, make it a point to understand how your teachers are. So, with all these tips that we just looked at, let's make a very simple study routine for your learn phase. So when you're learning, go over your chapter, make as many questions as possible. When you're making all of those questions, ask follow-up questions to yourself, mainly why and how. Write answers to those questions. If you're feeling like you are unsure of a particular answer or you need more explanations, ask your teachers or go over the internet for that. This is a very basic formula for any concept clarity that you require. Want to know a very step-by-step way of doing this? There's this document that I have put in the description down below that you can access for free to see how to exactly go about making this study plan properly. Make the most of it. With this, let's sign off for today. Thank you and happy learning.